The call came into the shelter just after noon. A large black dog had slipped through a damaged gate and was now running across an open field near the edge of town. Shelter volunteers rushed into their trucks, worried about what might happen. If the dog reached the nearby road, cars passed that area quickly, and a frightened animal could easily run into traffic. When they arrived, they spotted him immediately. He was standing alone in the tall grass, his dark fur moving slightly in the wind. He was massive, easily over 120 pounds, with broad shoulders and alert eyes that never stopped scanning his surroundings, but something about him didn't look aggressive. He looked scared. Every time someone stepped toward him, he moved away again, pacing nervously, as if he was trying to decide whether to run or stay. "Careful," one of the volunteers said quietly. "He's big. If he panics, he could hurt someone." A small crowd had gathered at the edge of the field. People whispered to each other, watching from a distance. Some were curious. Others were afraid. "That dog looks dangerous," someone said. The volunteers tried everything they could think of. They crouched low, spoke gently, and tossed a few pieces of food toward him. But the dog didn't move closer. His body stayed tense, ready to bolt at any second. That's when a girl named Emma appeared at the edge of the field. She had been walking home from school when she noticed the commotion. Emma was 17 years old, quiet and thoughtful. And she had always loved animals more than anything else. She had spent years helping injured birds and stray cats around her neighborhood. But when she saw the dog standing alone in the field, something about him caught her attention. He didn't look angry. He looked lost. One of the volunteers raised a hand as she stepped forward. "Hey, stop there," he warned. "We're trying to handle it." But Emma didn't stop. She walked slowly into the grass, her movements calm and steady. "Emma," someone shouted, "you don't know that dog." She heard the voices behind her, but she didn't turn around. Instead, she kept her eyes on the dog, and the dog kept his eyes on her. When she was about 10 feet away, Emma slowly knelt down. For a moment, everything felt completely still. The wind moved through the tall grass. The volunteers held their breath. No one spoke. Emma didn't reach toward him. She didn't try to grab him. She simply sat there, her hand resting gently on her knee. Then she spoke softly. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're not in trouble." The dog stood frozen, watching her carefully. 5 seconds passed, then 10, and then something incredible happened. The massive dog took a slow step forward, then another. His body relaxed slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing. Emma extended her hand just a little, and finally, the dog lowered his large head and gently pressed it into her palm. A wave of quiet relief moved through the people watching. The dog that everyone thought was dangerous had chosen to trust her. That afternoon, the volunteers were finally able to safely bring the dog back to the shelter. But Emma couldn't stop thinking about him. The shelter staff explained that the dog's name was Ranger. He had been surrendered weeks earlier when his previous owners moved away and couldn't keep such a large dog in their new apartment. Because of his size, most people were too intimidated to even consider adopting him. "He's strong," the shelter manager explained. "People worry they won't be able to handle him." But Emma had already made up her mind. Over the next week, she visited the shelter every day after school. At first, Ranger stayed quiet in his kennel, watching her from the corner. But after a few visits, his tail started wagging whenever she walked into the room. By the end of the week, Emma asked her parents the question she had been thinking about nonstop. "Can we bring Ranger home?" Her mother was unsure. Her father was even more skeptical. "That dog is huge," he said. "What if something goes wrong?" But Emma didn't give up. She explained how calm Ranger had been, how gentle he was when she visited, and how he had trusted her when everyone else was afraid. Eventually, after many conversations and promises of responsibility, her parents agreed. Ranger came home with them the following Saturday. At first, life with such a big dog felt unusual. Neighbors stared when Emma walked Ranger down the street. Some crossed to the other side of the sidewalk. Even Emma's friends were hesitant. "Are you sure he's safe?" one of them asked nervously. But Ranger never showed aggression. He spent most of his time quietly following Emma from room to room. He slept near the back door, always watching the yard, and at night, he curled up near Emma's bedroom door like a silent guardian. Still, Emma's father remained cautious. He didn't dislike Ranger. He just didn't fully trust him yet. Until one night changed everything. It happened late in the evening. Emma's father was working in the garage, fixing a loose shelf above his workbench. Ranger had been lying inside the house near the living room window. Suddenly, the dog jumped to his feet. His ears lifted, his body stiffened, and then he began barking. Not the playful bark Emma had heard before. This was loud, sharp, urgent. Emma looked up from the couch. "Ranger, what's wrong?" But the dog didn't stop. He ran to the back door, barking and scratching at it repeatedly. Emma opened the door, confused. The moment the door opened, Ranger sprinted toward the garage. Emma followed him. And then she saw it. Her father was lying on the floor beside the fallen ladder. He had slipped while reaching for the shelf and hit his head against the concrete. He was conscious, but barely able to move. Emma called for an ambulance immediately. Later, at the hospital, doctors told them something that made Emma's heart race. The fall could have been far worse if help hadn't arrived quickly. If Ranger hadn't barked and brought Emma outside, her father might have been lying there much longer. That night, when they returned home, Emma's father sat quietly beside Ranger in the living room. For a long moment, he simply looked at the dog. Then he reached down and gently scratched behind Ranger's ears. "I guess," he said with a small smile, "I was wrong about you." Ranger wagged his tail slowly, and Emma smiled too. Because the dog that everyone once feared had become the one protecting them all. Emma just looked at Ranger and whispered the words he had said the day they met in the field. "You're safe now." But something had changed in the house after that night. Ranger was no longer just the dog Emma had rescued. He had become something more, a protector, a quiet presence that seemed to understand the family better than anyone expected. Emma's father, who once kept his distance, started noticing little things. Every morning, Ranger would walk with him to the mailbox and sit patiently beside him, watching the street like a guard on duty. When Emma studied late at night, Ranger lay quietly beside her chair, occasionally lifting his head just to make sure she was still there. And whenever someone unfamiliar walked past the house, Ranger would calmly position himself between the door and the family inside. Not aggressive, just watchful. Neighbors who once crossed the street when they saw Ranger slowly began to realize something. The big dog they had feared was actually one of the gentlest animals they had ever seen. Children started asking if they could pet him during evening walks. And Emma's father, who once doubted bringing such a large dog into their home, now proudly told the story of how Ranger had saved him. But the moment that truly defined Ranger came months later. It was a cold autumn evening. Emma was walking Ranger through the same open field where they had first met. The sky was turning orange. As the sun dipped toward the horizon. Everything felt peaceful. Then, Ranger suddenly stopped. His ears lifted. His body became alert. Emma followed his gaze and saw something strange near the edge of the field. An older man had collapsed near a walking path. Without hesitation, Ranger pulled gently on the leash and guided Emma toward him. The man was barely conscious. Emma quickly called for help while Ranger stayed beside the man, lying calmly next to him as if keeping him company. Later, paramedics said that if someone hadn't found him when they did, the situation could have been much worse. As the ambulance drove away, Emma knelt beside Ranger in the fading light. She wrapped her arms around his neck and smiled. "You always know when someone needs help, don't you?" Ranger wagged his tail slowly, resting his head against her shoulder. "Sometimes the world judges too quickly. A dog looks big, strong, intimidating, and people assume the worst. But sometimes those same animals carry the biggest hearts. They notice things we miss. They sense danger before we do. And sometimes they show loyalty in ways that words can't explain. Emma had taken a chance on a dog that everyone else feared. And in return, Ranger gave her family something priceless. Trust. Protection. And a reminder that kindness can change everything. And while some people still saw Ranger as a large, intimidating dog, Emma always saw the truth. He wasn't dangerous. He was simply waiting for someone to believe in him.